What up, peeps? Okay, so I went to go see Blackie Adam and it was stupid, but it wasn't actually terrible either. And when I say it wasn't terrible, I mean it was amusing and kept enough of my attention that I had no issue with seeing this till the end, surprisingly. Even if the ending wasn't really anything special at all. This was just another stock DC film that was noisy AF, and by the end you kind of walk out and you're like, now I can move on with my life. The biggest compliment I can give this movie is that it's at least better than Man of Steel. I mean, Man of Steel was stupid and terrible to a degree where it revealed its dishonesty. This one didn't really give no fucks, but at the same time it tried to make Black Adam some sort of anti-hero, and I'll get into that later. Trust me. Dwayne Johnson, however, sucked as Black Adam, and despite this role being reserved for him for 15 years, and this production was like a 10-year span, I'm pretty shocked how restrained and unspecial his performance was. He was literally like 80% stoic and 20% sarcastic, with the sarcastic part being failed attempts every single time. Now look, I'm not saying that Dwayne Johnson is an Oscar level actor, because he's definitely not. He's far from one. He is the Schwarzenegger of this generation without the heavy accent. And that being said, the right material can bring the entertaining and charismatic side out of him. I actually liked him in Moana, but The Rundown is my favorite film from his, and I recommended it in one of my early videos. So this was a really irritating and disappointing thing not to see The Rock's best aspects of his acting of this action star not be utilized for this character, and it ended up really hurting the film's tone. Not that the tone was consistent in the first place. One of the characters, which is this terrible child actor, is like, you can be a hero, you're awesome, you should have a hero name, a catchy one but not too corny, or you know, you've heard this crap before. You know, the annoying kid that's like the #1 fan of the main character who's a superhero, and I guess he's supposed to be an extension or a representation of the fandom of the audience watching this movie. Yeah, the chemistry between these two was completely dead in the water. The boy feels like he's from a completely different movie, and Black Adam also seems like he's from a completely different movie. And both these characters have absolutely zero dynamic or zero chemistry. It seems like every time the boy says something upbeat, Black Adam just gives this blank, over serious stare and maybe some boring, overly serious monosyllabic responses, and that's pretty much their chemistry in a nutshell for the 2-hour runtime. It's hard to find any investment in this dynamic if there's little no development throughout this 2-hour and 5-minute movie. You know what I liked about Shazam is that the chemistry between both Billy and Freddy is that Freddy was the catalyst for Billy to look inside to see his potential as a hero. Another issue with this movie is that visually it just looks murky and miserable. There's a lot of orange and yellow and brown, just the same freaking colors with a little bit of red. Now I'll take this over the murky, mute, whatever they were going for color palette in Man of Steel, but the color palette they chose for this movie just doesn't really add to the film at all. It looks as dull and as lifeless as you could possibly make it. It's always good to have a distinctive style, but this style doesn't really seem to serve much of a purpose because the film itself lacks any personality of its own, so it just clashes painfully with this film's unbalanced tone, and the fight scenes weren't anything remarkable either. Now this was directed by, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, Jean Colette Serra, and I've only seen like 2 movies from him prior to this one, and that's House of Wax from 2005, and Orphan was what, 2010? I don't remember. I'll just fix it in post. And based off those films, he seems to be a competent director, but those were horror films. While he also directed some action films with Liam Neeson, and these action scenes in Black Adam come off as way too closely shot and cut, which is something that he should have left behind in the film Unknown, because this film could have benefited from decent action scenes like in The Commuter, which was actually shockingly decently filmed. Even during the special effects, they were usually shot and edited way too freaking close, especially when it came to some of the aerial combat. So many times it just felt alienating, especially when it came to the indoor fight scenes, and I thought we left that in the 2010s or the early 2010s, but apparently we didn't. This is followed by these dated slow-mo effects that were also something that should have been left behind also. I mean, come on guys, stop trying to do Snyder stuff. He's like not in the DC thing anymore. It was terrible, and it was just one of the most dated things I've seen, and it was so comical every time they used it. Alright, now I'm gonna spoil the whole plot, so skip to this point in the video because I have quite a bit to say about this movie, more so than I thought. Okay, so the film's writing is only partial trash, which isn't saying anything at all. I'm saying partially because at the very least, the action scenes, despite not being that well shot, were still admittedly entertaining paradoxically. But when it came to the plot, lore, and story, it was just like a massive failure. The opening is the absolute worst kind of exposition. I understand that this is a fantasy story and many of the elements won't won't be fully understandable unless somebody explains it, but this was so boring and it was rushed for some reason. I mean, like I said again, back to Man of Steel, which was stupid, but at the very least, the opening took its time and developed the stupid concepts in history without some sort of narration. So yeah, this is very pretty stupid and annoying moment where the kid throws a fruit basket at one of the soldiers in the opening and it subdues a soldier long enough to get the kid to prompt the extensive uprising. He kind of puts his hands in the air. I can't do it right now because I don't have my camera on. It was kind of like what the guys did from Mad Max Fury Road. You know, the War Boys did the thing where they put their hands up. But it gets worse because we're introduced to the setting years later and we have to start with the most boring characters ever. The film tries its best to make these characters likable and humorous, but oh boy, if the film's visual style was already dull enough and boring, these characters just feel so forcefully humorous and it just doesn't feel natural at all. So yeah, it's the tonal clash of the film that's already kind of established, and I was feeling this weird sense of sleepiness and I was literally ready to take a nap in the theater for the rest of the film. It's like, if this is what the movie was going to be like, then I'll go to sleep. So yeah, once Black Adam came and started killing everything and everybody in sight, the movie got slightly less boring, but unfortunately more cringe. So yeah, they played Paint It Black by Rolling Stones and it was so awful and inappropriate and it was just like so cheesy and corny. Like, my god. Once again, it just kind of ties with this film's tonal inconsistencies. But before I continue, I want to acknowledge that the film dumps exposition about Black Adam before we even meet him. So that element of surprise and mystery has completely been taken off the table and it's gone. So yeah, when we see him, we're just kind of like, eh. And again, like Man of Steel, we hear so much about this character. They talk about him, and once we see him, he's a lot less interesting than the dialogue implies. The mom character is pretty much just one big walking exposition dump and never emerges as a character, not once in this entire film, and it just gets worse from here. But the stupidest part of this scene when Black Adam returns and he's surrounded by one of the soldiers, one of them is like, hey, go ahead and tell him to put his hands up and we'll stay here even though we can do it at this position. So the stupid soldier walks towards Black Adam and tells him to put his hands up, and of course that soldier gets grabbed by the neck and he gets wrecked because saying it at the distance that you already were in the first place just wouldn't be enough. Why didn't you all just simultaneously just tell him to put his hands up? It was less safer, but being at a reasonable distance just wasn't good enough. So yeah, he saves the mother from one of the soldiers even though he has zero clue who that character is, and for all he knows, she could be working with the soldiers, or one of the soldiers could have grabbed the crown, so he probably would have saved them if he grabbed it, and then he would have been on the soldier side. But the plot works for these characters. This is where the film becomes less boring, even though that's not really saying anything. Once the Justice Society came and started fighting Black Adam, I started to envision what this movie actually could have been. If I had it my way, I would write this film starting with the Justice Society, because in all honesty, they were a lot more entertaining and a lot more interesting than boring Adam. And I feel like this didn't happen because The Rock's ego wouldn't make that sacrifice, because we really need to be smashed over the head that he's an anti-hero and not actually a villain. This character can't develop or anything at all. There's no development. There's just none. I mean, when he realizes that his homeworld changed after 5,000 years, his reaction is amazingly underwhelming. Now, based off the research I actually did on Black Adam, yeah, I seriously did research, The Rock got the sternness part down to a T. When it comes to rage, yeah, that's the most restrained part of his performance. Once again, it's pretty annoying that The Rock just couldn't let go of his ego and give it his best, since, you know, he's had this role for 15 years. It would be nice to see The Rock just cut loose and do this character the way he wants to do it. I guess he thought that a stern, boring, emotionless, dull Black Adam interpretation was the best way to go. If there's one aspect of this movie that I found to be a legitimate highlight, it was Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate. Yeah, he was such a refreshing part of this movie that every time he was on screen, I was actually genuinely interested. Despite the irritation of him taking his helmet on and off like every 5 seconds. Like, come on, pick one, Mr. Bond. So yeah, once the Justice Society came into play, the film's tone continued to be all over the place, especially since they're all sort of distinctive characters. After Black Adam goes on his murder spree, the film starts injecting some sort of unfunny degree of jokes and banter you could possibly inappropriately place in a superhero movie of this type, and this doesn't help that the characters are just very flat and uninteresting. And back to the mom character, there is a moment where the bad guy that screwed her over shoots her brother, and her son sees this and calls her. She's like, "Mom, they shot your brother," and she's like talking to Black Adam, and when she gets the message, she doesn't seem to really react. She's like, Oh, damn, that sucks. So anyway, Black Adam, hey, you want to be a superhero and save the world? Like, your brother just got shot and you don't seem to care. If this is her reaction, how does she know that her brother isn't dead at this point? I guess she must have read the script ahead of time and knew that Dr. Fate will already approach him and confirm that he'll be okay from the gunshot wound. But it's irritating how this film did not give the character some sort of emotional reaction to her own brother getting shot. Get out of here, movie. Come on. So yeah, there's this time-wasting scene where Adam and Hawk Dude fight for no reason other than to extend the runtime, and I guess if a fight didn't start, then they never would have found that the crown was hidden in the boys' room. So it's kind of the stupid scene like in Transformers 2 when Mudflap and Skids were fighting until they progressed the plot by hitting the wall by accident and revealing the matrix of leadership. Yep, just happens for no reason except to progress the plot. Yep, so there's a pretty cool twist where we learn that he was actually the father and not the boy like we saw. You know, that was subversive, I guess. The boy actually sacrificed himself and gave the power to his father, but after we learn that twist, he decides to just give up his power because he's like such a destroyer. It was after he try to save the boy. I can't really tell exactly what happened. I can't comprehend it. It looked kind of confusing, or maybe I was looking down at my phone that whole time when the building blew up, but I think the boy got injured from the destruction of the building, and Black Adam was like, I feel really, really bad about doing this, so I'm gonna give up my power. So he's put into some sort of containment unit. He's like an underwater facility or whatever, because he was like, I don't want to ever say Shazam, or don't make sure that I say Shazam ever again. And apparently he has this uncontrollable urge and impulse to say Shazam, even though we never see them actually transform before. So like, is it when he gets upset or something? Like, when does he feel the uncontrollable urge to say Shazam? Like, what is he, like the Hulk now? And I also want to add, I love how Warner Brothers, y'all are so stupid. How stupid do you have to be to give away this twist in the second trailer?
My son sacrificed his life to save me.
It's like 3 seconds in and the twist is already that his son gave him the power. Like, honestly, did they really have to be so desperate to market this movie that they actually give away the plot twist in the second trailer? If you ever see this movie, skip the trailers. The trailers ruin the twist. It ruins everything. Warner Brothers, you are all idiots. So yeah, he's in prison in this underwater facility, and this was the moment where I felt the script was just being made up as I went along, because this came out of nowhere, this underground facility or whatever, and the boy doesn't even bother asking about where he is. Like, he kind of wakes up from his injury and he's like, oh, who? Like, he didn't even acknowledge or even ask about Adam. Like, what did the writers kind of forget that he kind of came to him and wanted to be his friend? So yeah, the Justice Society hasn't told this facility about the city being under the reign of tyrants. If they throw Adam in the container forever, then how will they settle this whole thing about the bad guy taking over the city? And that question is answered by simply they cannot. So yeah, the bad guy, whose character name I forgot, he's revealed to be the ancestor of the king from 5,000 years ago that Black Adam destroyed, or he kind of killed everybody in the kingdom or something. But the film starts dumping exposition in a scene where we're already seeing him in the underworld. It's happening right now. Like, it's happening right now, and we're getting exposition at the same time. So yeah, the villain sells his soul to Satan and becomes like a hell thingy. I don't remember the villain's name. And the editing is so rushed when we see his transformation. It's like, it doesn't let you breathe or anything. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it gets even worse because the villain looks absolutely ridiculous. Now, if you think that Steppenwolf from the Whedon Justice League looked bad, you got to check this out. It looks hilarious. I laughed out loud in the theater from that. It looked so bad. Okay, so the Justice Society gets wrecked as expected, and not Doctor Strange does the cloning thing like Doctor Strange did in Infinity War in almost every single way. And then he tells Adam that you gotta be a superhero again. So I assume the Justice Society has no real affiliation with that underwater facility. It's not really explained clearly, because Adam just starts beating them all up. Like, he starts beating all the soldiers up. And why didn't Dr. Fate just tell the director of that place to free Black Adam? I'm pretty sure I bet $1,000 that he would have freed him. So I'm not really sure why Dr. Fate decided to just do it this way. Like, the relationship between the Justice Society and this underground facility that I guess is owned by the government, it's just not very clear. So it's a weirdly badly handled scene that makes no sense. Okay, so yeah, then the movie turns into The Mummy, I guess, and the terrible child actor gets everyone to rise up and fight. Dr. Fate is killed, the best character in the film, but he had a pretty solid send-off. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really enjoyed how they handled that. And Black Adam gets a suit upgrade for no reason. The film doesn't explain why he gets like this decently pretty good looking suit upgrade, but whatever. So Hawk and Black Adam beat the computer CGI Satan bad guy, and the movie ends where they don't really say the hero name at the end, you know, the thing that's been done 1,000 times before, and it's not very clever. You know, I kind of liked how it was handled in the first Iron Man movie.
I am Iron Man.
It's not like, oh, I'm not gonna say my name, but the end credits will have the title so you can see it and the audience can go, woohoo! So stupid. So yeah, Black Adam is a superhero now? Is he an anti-hero? He no longer has conflicted morals again? Like, I thought that he wasn't I thought he was an anti-hero. Anti-hero doesn't mean that you're a solidified superhero. That doesn't make any sense now. But he's a superhero like any other superhero in any superhero movie. So yeah, Superman will be in the next Black Adam film, even though it doesn't matter because we all know how it'll turn out anyway. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that the Adam character, while he was cool, he's kind of like Ant-Man, but he's like a less funny version, but I still like the powers. And I guess what the girl's name is, Cyclone, she was decent. Actually, I'll even go as far as say that both her and Adam's chemistry was pretty cool. I think had they developed the story a little better and, you know, sharpened the characters, I think that whole thing between them probably would have been interesting. There was something there. There was some sort of chemistry there that was unfortunately weighed down by this movie's plot. So yeah, once again, this movie isn't really bad. It's just kind of mediocre. Entertaining, but mediocre and forgettable and just very stupid. I mean, you know, it's dumb entertainment for the sake of just trying to get Black Adam to the DC universe, so who cares? Now, what I loved about Shazam is that it was a consistent, tonally executed film throughout. The film was much tighter in its writing and it felt more self-aware and it had fun with itself. So obviously Black Adam, much like the character, the film just wants to have it both ways tonally. Shazam did have its dark moments, but it was well balanced out. While this has too many of several things going on tonally, and it just makes for a very uneven and pretty ridiculous movie. The movie will probably make its money back anyway, but this hasn't really sold me on the character. Much like Man of Steel, Black Adam was just a prop and never really emerged as a real character, and this is thanks to the restrained performance of the guy that really wanted to play this character. So yeah, not that good, but it was watchable. So I'm gonna be generous and give it a 2 out of 5 stars. The DC fanboys and girls will probably really like this more than I did, and of course it's gonna have a sequel, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna start that franchise they've been wanting to start for 15 years. But for me, it was a dud that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be because I didn't see any trailers. But if you like this kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to enjoy it a lot more, and you'll probably be into it, and hopefully you won't think too much about it like I thought about it. Just turn your brain off and you'll enjoy it. Alright peeps, I'm working on my Blair Witch review. That's pretty much the only update I can give you. But hopefully you guys are having a good week, and I will see you in the future. Peace out and love y'all.